Hey everybody, I'm back. And I'm back with another home bartender video for bartenderatlas.com. As I've mentioned before, it's a fantastic site that has profiles of bartenders from around the world. So if you're traveling, you can search by city, and then you can find a bar you want to go to, find one of the bartenders, and feel like you already know somebody. I'm sure they'd be thrilled if you went in and say, hey, I saw your profile on Bartender Atlas, and I wanted to come in and meet you. The profiles are kind of fun. They have the bartender's favorite drink, some stories from behind the bar. It's really great. They also have cocktail recipes, book reviews, and features like these, so definitely check them out. This time I'm back to talk about syrups. What they are, how to make them, how to store them, and how to use them in your cocktails. So let's get into it. So, syrups. Basically, it's any sweet liquid. And usually you make a syrup with just sugar and water, and that's called simple syrup. The most common kind of simple syrup is 1 part sugar to 1 part water. I've seen these made by volume or by weight. I usually make mine by volume. So 1 cup of sugar to 1 cup of water, and that's simple syrup. I've seen these things for sale as well. I think there's no real reason to be buying simple syrup when it's so easy to make. Maybe if you're buying like a flavored syrup or something like that, but even those aren't that hard to make, and we'll get to that in a little bit. The reason for using syrups in cocktails is that it's kind of hard to dissolve sugar in something that's cold or room temperature, as I'm sure you know. There are drinks that call for powdered sugar or a sugar cube, and it's fun to play around with those things as well. For everyday cocktail making, a simple syrup is just so much easier. The sugar is already dissolved. You can control the amount you want to put in. It's really, well. Now if you are making just a 1-to-1 simple syrup, which is your basic syrup that you're going to use in most drinks, you can make that with cold water or room temperature water. With enough stirring and agitation, you're going to dissolve the sugar in the water. But the best way to really do it is with hot water. You could just boil water in a kettle, pour it over the sugar, stir it up. But the most common process is to mix your equal parts of sugar and water in a little saucepan. Heat it until the sugar dissolves just below boiling, because if it boils, the water starts to evaporate and you change your ratio. And then let it cool, bottle it, and put it in the fridge. Now, simple syrup that's heated and put in a clean container will last for a little while in the fridge. I mean, you know, sort of 2 weeks, maybe a month. I've had simple syrups last longer. I wouldn't necessarily recommend trying, but I've also had them start to actually grow mold. So just make how much you think you're going to use. I tend to put my simple syrup in a bottle like this. I really like these swing top bottles. They seal. I keep them in the fridge. I use them for a lot of different things, but you can really use anything that can seal and that's easy to pour. I do try to run it through a sieve, because if there are any undissolved sugar crystals, you will start to grow like little crystals around it when it's in the fridge. So it's good to try to filter it out. And again, for a 1-to-1 simple syrup, probably not really necessary. The other kind of really common simple syrup is a 2-to-1 simple syrup. So instead of equal parts sugar and water, you go 2 parts of sugar to 1 part water. Now, this is also called rich simple syrup, or just rich simple, which would be a terrible pseudonym for a bartender. I'm sure someone's used it before. Maybe I should have used it for this channel. Sorry for the dad joke. To make rich simple syrup, you definitely need heat. You're not going to dissolve that much sugar in that little water just by stirring and shaking. You're going to end up with this much more viscous liquid. It does add this really nice kind of texture to the drink. If you want to get a good idea of how a rich simple syrup can change or affect a drink, I suggest trying to make a classic daiquiri. So a classic daiquiri is 2 parts rum, usually white rum, 1 part fresh lime juice, and 1 part simple syrup. If you take that same drink and make it with a rich simple syrup, suddenly you're decreasing the volume of that drink. So you're going 2 parts of rum, 1 part of the lime juice, but only half simple syrup, because the liquid is twice as sweet. And suddenly you have the same drink, in essence. You have the same amount of sweetness and sourness balancing the rum, but you have less volume, and you get this drink with a much different texture. It's really interesting to see how a small change like that can really change a drink. You can make a simple syrup from just about any kind of sugar. You can make it from brown sugar, raw sugar, anything you want. Again, the basic classic one is just white, everyday sugar that you have at home. But apart from like a powdered sugar, you can make a syrup from anything that's sweet. Some drinks will call for a honey syrup. And I've seen different ratios of honey syrups, anything from 1:1 to 3:1. If you're making a specific recipe that you found in a book and it calls for a certain ratio of honey to water to make their syrup, I'd say go with that. But when I'm just making a honey syrup to keep at home and make drinks with, again, I go 1:1. Mainly the reason is to make it a little more runny, so it's a little easier to use. But there are a lot of different kinds of honey. And if you're playing around with this, it's always good. Again, I've said this before, it's always good to taste your drinks, taste your ingredients. You may have to add a little more, a little less. There's also agave syrup. This is syrup made from the agave plant, which is the same plant that tequila is made from. There's a drink called a Tommy's Margarita, which is just tequila, lime juice, and agave syrup. You're using something that's already in the tequila, agave, and using it to sweeten the drink. So it's a really great balance. Again, try making a classic margarita with a simple syrup and Cointreau or triple sec, and then make a Tommy's Margarita, and just see how those two things are a little different. It's great. And then there's, just classic maple syrup. You can just put this straight into a drink, make like an old fashioned with maple syrup instead of with simple syrup. You can really use anything that's sweet to sweeten a drink. The thing with simple syrup is that you're not adding a lot of flavor to a drink. It's just sugar, it doesn't add a lot of flavor. When you get into things like honey and maple syrup and agave, yeah, there's more flavor getting added there. But really you're adding sweetness with a little bit of flavor. You can also make a flavored syrup though. There are syrups called cordials, for example, which use a fruit juice, so lime cordial being probably the most common one. It's used most commonly in a drink called a gimlet, which is gin and lime cordial. And lime cordial is usually made with the juice of a lime plus the peels and then added sugar. And you let that sit, then you strain out the peels. The acids in the lime juice help dissolve the sugar. The peels add some of those oils and a little bit of background bitterness. And so you can look up recipes like that. You could make a grapefruit cordial. You could make a citrus cordial with a bunch of different citrus fruits. So there's a lot of things you can play around with, or you can just add flavors to your simple syrups. You could make anything really. I once made a raspberry peppercorn syrup. You could make a lavender syrup by just adding some lavender, or a rosemary syrup by adding rosemary. Think about the kind of flavors that you like. Think about the flavors that are in your base spirits that you want to have in your drinks. And you can use flavored syrups to enhance those flavors. So really, just use your imagination. Adds that little bit of uniqueness and personal touch to your drinks. And it's a way to make a slight variation on a classic drink, but that people maybe have never had before. And those are the basics of syrups. I hope this has been interesting and informative. I hope you try to make your own syrups at home. I'd love to hear about how that goes, or what other things about syrups you'd like to know that I maybe missed. All right, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. And until then, I've been your home bartender. Cheers.